Monday's statement by northern governors as well as traditional rulers in that region that zoning of the presidency was unconstitutional is attracting condemnation from various social groups, I should say. The Ohanaeze were worldwide not only concerned that the northern governors and the leadership of the People's Democratic Party, but further warned against the North insisting on producing President Muhammadu Buhari's successor in 2023. According to a statement by Secretary General Ohanaeze Ndigbo, Okechukwu Ezeguzoro, another northern president will fuel the agitation for Oduduwa Republic as well as Biafra Nation, and therefore warned that such a narrow disposition threatened the unity of the country. A lot of back and forth reactions to the Northern Governors meeting.
But of course it threatens the unity of the country, yes. That kind of statement.
Yes.
It definitely does, because the issue has always been about equity, fairness, more than any other. These are not just sentimental little issues. We're actually talking existential issues. And there will be no Nigeria to govern over if we continue at the rate that we're going. We do need some kind of cohesion. And statements like what we heard from the Northern Governors Forum in response to their counterparts in the South about the use of the word must or should or whatever, really are not going to help matters. And come November, I'm pretty sure that the Southern governors will be ready with a response of their own, and so we will continue to go until they all are able to resolve this issue, which I hope the National Governors Forum will give them an opportunity to do before they take us all to the brink of disaster. It's actually very worrying.
Dr. Bati?
Well, I think at the level of conversation, I think we should encourage conversation, we should encourage debate. At some point, I had even advocated that perhaps the present administration should have seized the opportunity to create a forum. You can call it national conference, you can give it any level, where the ethnic nationalities will meet and some of these, conversations can take place in an organized manner. But the government, having not seen the need for that, has now created a situation whereby we have this large conversation on the key national questions out there, and so nobody is coordinating it. And that's the danger, because you cannot speak in terms of outcomes. But what is clear is that, as I pointed out yesterday, there is a North-South divide. There are persons who are agitated about many issues in terms of how Nigeria is organized. They've always been agitated. It's been an issue since the colonial period, since the Willings Commission of 1958-1959. The seriousness of it is the omission, the big omission, the fact that we've not been able to address many of those issues up to now, 61 years after independence. However, I think that we should, call on all parties involved, whether they are spokespersons, stakeholders from the South or from the North, to exercise restraint, to avoid that kind of rhetoric that could further inflame passions and put Nigeria in a very difficult situation. You can see that many Nigerian stakeholders are digging into their ethnic, primordial, anthropomorphic trenches, and on the basis of that, they are, evaluating the immediate future of Nigeria. Now, the key issues on the table, yes, you are right, Tundo, it's about equity. It's about people having a sense of ownership, a sense of belonging, about people thinking, believing, seeing that they are not second-class citizens in their own country. And the big question is, when is a nation? Is Nigeria yet a nation? Or is it just a country? Or is it just a state? When, we reach the level where we can talk about nationhood, maybe we'll be able to achieve those values about, togetherness, about a sense of belonging, whereby people think of themselves first and foremost as Nigerians, not as persons from the North or from the South or from certain parts of the country. 2023 presidency, we had Alhaji Yaya Kwande here yesterday, who was saying categorically that, in fact, it was the South, through the PDP, that breached the agreement. It was more or less resolved, although he said, well, anybody can run for president, that the presidency in 2023 should go to the North. Now, there are some Southerners, since that interview, who have been saying, okay, what if we add, who is talking about equity here? What if we add the years dominated by the military, majorly leaders from the North running Nigeria?
Exactly.
If we add that to the return to civilian rule since 1999, then of course there will be a strong case to be made for an imbalance in power sharing. So again, VAT, northern governors, they have a different position. Open grazing, they seem to have sustained the position held by the governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai. So I think all of this is unhealthy for the polity. And the people who are in positions of leadership responsibility should be careful. They should know that the kind of signals that they send out there, can have implications. Of course, the reaction from Ohanaeze, Ndigbo, and other groups, Akai Kinga and other groups, that's to be expected. Because the main argument of the southern leaders, the governors and other stakeholders, is that, look, in this thing called the Nigerian Union, there is no inferior party. The country belongs to all of us. And the conversation about Nigeria should be about equity, justice, and fairness, and transparency, and accountability. And that all of this cannot be determined along certain groups considering themselves privileged. So that's why I say the conversation is useful. But we'll need to make progress on all of those issues.
I mean, I think the words of Massimiliano Azzeglu reigns true here, the Italian statesman. After building of Italy, says, we have built Italy, but it is time to build Italians. I think the big formative question here is, when are we going to build Nigerians?
When indeed? When
are we going to build Nigerians? Because in all of this conversation, I don't hear the suffering people of Nigeria first.
No.
I just hear interests. I never hear about the plight of people. In one of the responses by Ohanaeze Ndigbo, they talked about the fact that the impoverishment of the North that happened under Northern leaders when they were president.
It hardly recommends them, does it?
In this country. Oh. So, time will tell. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotus, Michael, Adesua, and Aaron to give us updates on global and Africa business, COVID-19 pandemic, spotting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Good morning to all our viewers. We begin with oil and gas. It's on the front page of today's This Day newspaper. The NATI, the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, has revealed that 77 oil and gas firms in Nigeria owe the federal government a whopping 2.6 trillion naira. This was revealed by the executive secretary of NATI in the capital, Federal Capital Territory in Abuja, Dr. Ogbonnaya Orji. And it just looks like they haven't remitted anything. Said they're owing petroleum profit tax, they're owing company income tax, they're owing education tax, VAT, withholding tax. It doesn't look like these firms paid anything at all. Now, we know we have revenue challenges. We're looking for funds everywhere possible. Yesterday, I mentioned the fact that the NNPC said they're deducting 149 billion that's going towards subsidy from the federation accounts. Even though oil prices are north of $80 a barrel, we're still not getting the revenue that we need. So, with what NATI has brought out here, well, it's important to note that the federal government needs funds. Now, it's interesting that Dr. Ogbonnaya Orji did also mention he converted it to dollars as well. Instead of 410, it comes to about $6.4 billion, and he said he could fund about 46% of our budget. Now, if you remove the subsidy, you'd save $1 trillion naira, which is roughly about half of what this 2.6 trillion that they owe. And if you cut that in half, that's 23% of the budget. I think my math is right. Yeah, 50% of 46%. Anyway, the issue is, if the federal government is this adamant about revenue that is needed and that they need to find from somewhere, then, there's still the issue of the subsidies and removing that. But be that as it may, that doesn't, justify what we're seeing here, where 77 firms are owing 2.6 trillion naira and just don't seem to have paid any types of taxes at all. So Interesting development there. Still in Nigeria, President Buhari was represented by Vice President Osibanjo in Rivers State at the Ikwere local government area in Rivers State. He commissioned 66 flats built by the NDDC, the Nigeria Delta Commission, for police officers in the Nigeria Special Protection Unit Base 6 at Omogwa Ikwere local government in Rivers State. And again, President was represented by Vice President Osibanjo. He stated that funding for the police is still a challenge, although he did mention that they started a police trust fund, but it's still a bit of a challenge for the Federation, which now, of course, and I think was it Tundu? One or three of you have talked about the issue of state police, so that those funding requirements or those funding pressures won't be on the federal government. But then, how many of the states are buoyant enough to be able to now support their own police force? Which brings us back to the issue of subsidy. If you save the trillion naira, well, you probably have money to fund the police. I keep tagging on this subsidy matter and every story. And then finally, South Africa. We go to South Africa. The Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, the DITC, said they've so far shored up about 1 billion rand for firms in South Africa, that is in the KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng area, that were hardest hit by those deadly riots that took place a few months ago. This is part of a wider 3.75 billion rand plan to get funding over to those businesses. So this good development there, in that the funding that needs to, get to those hardest hit businesses gets there. Again, South Africa, though, many of the businesses still have an insurance issue, where insurance penetration is not that high amongst smaller firms. But that is our African business update for today.
So for me, Rotus, what I struggle to understand is the contrast of Nigeria. So much wealth and so much waste and so much lack and so much poverty. 4 scenarios. So much wealth. Because the government keeps complaining about revenue. But we have many channels to make revenue from, and it stares at us in the face every single time. Taxes is one of them. If we show up our tax base, we can collect close to 15% of taxes, match against our GDP. Currently, we are doing about 7% of taxes, match against our GDP. Why can't we collect enough taxes? We all know the problem of trust. We all know other sundry problems. We all know how we've not brought people into tax nets. That's one. So much waste. Amidst all of this, there's so much waste. We're borrowing more money. We're not seeing the impact on our economy. We are frittering away our future resource to pay subsidy. So much waste that subsidy is taking away. Amidst all of this, so much lack. So many people living in poverty. 82 to 83 million people in Nigeria. Half of the population, I should say, live in poverty, hardship, and squalor. Amidst all of this, so much potential. We've not even scratched the surface yet in research, technology, and development. Do you know how much will come to Nigeria if it becomes a talent and research, education-driven economy? Do you know how much we can make if we start to make products and export them? So this is the contrast of Nigeria. Pretty much replica of Charles Dickens' writing. It is a tale of two cities. So much wealth, so much opportunity, but so much poverty, so much insecurity, so much squalor. Where will these two cities meet?
Okay, first, let me start with South Africa.
And debt capital, Rufai, you've talked about debt capital that needs to be sold off, and so that's another issue as well.
Let me start with South Africa. In July, you will recall when the Constitutional Court in South Africa, charged former President Jacob Zuma, for contempt and decided to sentence him to 15 months imprisonment. There was that reaction in his part of the country, in KwaZulu-Natal, in Gauteng, and for weeks there was a lot of destruction. Shops were looted, there was a lot of burning, there was a lot of destruction of property. And all of that went on. But Jacob Zuma submitted himself to the police. He was in custody for about a month before he got a medical parole. Went to court, tried to get himself off the hook. That has not happened. But there was that violence, which shook the entire country. And at the time, we praised, the judiciary in South Africa as insisting that nobody truly was above the law. But there were consequences in terms of the destruction that was witnessed in KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, and Durban. Now, government has stepped in to help all those businesses that were affected. Low interest rate loans will be given. This has nothing to do with insurance. About 1 billion rand, and beyond all of that, about half of the money has already been made available to inject liquidity into businesses and to help stabilize the economy. Well, why am I telling this long story? To give an example of where, in a moment of crisis, you see government trying to be responsive. And I compare that to Nigeria. We had something similar, more or less, although the details may be different, with the NSAS protests in October 2020. We saw many cases of, destroyed property, innocent persons who lost their investments, persons whose businesses were affected in the Lekki, Ajah axis of Lagos. How many of those businesses have we helped? Yes, there is a Judicial Commission of Inquiry at work, but what effort really has government made, either in Lagos or in other states, other parts of the country, to help those vulnerable businesses, many of them, that would never return to business? So for me, the South African example that you brought, is there any question that we can learn from it? As for police funding, well, I don't know. I mean, yes, it is good to see, the federal government, the NDDC, giving policemen a block of 66 flats in Omagua, in Port Harcourt. But this is something that needs to be done for every police formation across Nigeria. Have you visited any police barracks? I don't know how people manage to survive in those funny-looking spaces. And policemen, if indeed we take security seriously, then the welfare of our policemen is also important. And that includes where they live. So they've done 66 flats in Rivers State. Yes, congratulations, excellent. But we would need to see more. But the question that has now been raised by government is that, we have a revenue problem, the police need more support. Okay, what has happened to the Police Trust Fund? What has happened to all that talk about police reform? And when we talk about Police Trust Fund at the federal level, look, I was on the pioneer board of the Lagos State Security Trust Fund. We did it. And the people who came after us, they've been able to sustain it here in Lagos. And there are lessons that the federal government can learn. Say, for example, from the Lagos State example, the blueprint is there. From Ashiwaju to Fashola to Ambode to the present governor Sanwo-Olu, he's been working. So if he can work at the state level in Lagos State, what is lacking at the federal level? Political will. The board of the Police Trust Fund at the federal level has been constituted. Why are they not working? So we shouldn't pay lip service to the welfare of the police because they're very strategic, they're very important. And what are we doing about recruitment? We don't even have enough policemen in Nigeria. So it's not just about cash. It's also about the political will, it's about commitment, and it's about outcomes, about results.
Well, I'm pleased to say that the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund gave 1.1 billion naira to 1,880 businesses that were affected when the hoodlums took over the NSAS protest. So I do think that they deserve to be commended for that. Now, with regards to the oil companies owing this gargantuan amount of money that can fund 46% of the 2021 budget, it's all very well and good for NITI to disclose that and put it into the proper context, but who is responsible for recovery? Is it not FIRS? I wish they would use their energy to recover these huge sums instead of this wild goose chase to the Supreme Court and trying to slip constitutional amendments in a clandestine fashion in the National Assembly. What's your take on that? Recovery is what is important now.
Excellent point. I saw you were going there with the whole VAT controversy. Well, exactly, because I mean, again, petroleum profit tax not paid, company income tax not paid, education tax, VAT, withholding tax. So what's the regulator doing? So yeah, a great point.
Well,
we need details on those businesses that Lagos State gave money to. But if Lagos State did Cross River State, did it do the same thing? Did Plateau State do the same thing? All those other states where we had the wanton destruction during the NSAS protest in October 2020.
there are details because I was following this up. I'll send you something. Yeah. Thank you so much, Berates. Now, moving on to more business updates, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. I'm going to take you first of all to Japan. They've got a new prime minister there who is called Fumio Kishida. And just that's breaking news, really. He's US friendly and also slightly alarmed at Chinese, alarmed at Chinese or China's military expansion. The Nikkei down about 2.83. I don't think it's anything to do with politics. I think it's more to do with the markets just kind of licking their wounds, really, as everybody is doing this morning. Kospi suffering. The Shanghai Composite in China is down by almost 2%, CSI 300 down 1.5%. China is asking state firms to pick up Evergrande's debt. Again, we still have not heard the detail of all this, but it's to sell its $1.5 billion stake in a Chinese bank, and they're hoping that that will be picked up. The property giant, as you know, is struggling. It hasn't made its payments as far as I know, and tomorrow it's due to make 47.5 million payments. In fact, that's today. Due today, and it did not make its 83 million. That was last week as well. So we're seeing, but it looks like there's 30 days still for it to actually to come to terms with all this. That's the length, but it just adds another cloud, basically a relatively bleak landscape as far as equities are concerned. Sharp rise in US yields. We're going to the United States now. Overnight broke the already fragile spirit, basically, of Wall Street. Chairman Jay Powell wasn't quite as dovish, the Fed, as hoped. Rising fears of the US debt ceiling and all the rest of it. US stocks fell sharply yesterday. Nasdaq, its worst performance since March. Dow Jones lost 569 points. So basically what we're saying is that gradually people are looking at, there's not a taper tantrum so much as the market's actually thinking about what it's actually going to go for and how much they'll actually be. And stock strategists are saying there's further for equity markets to fall in the United States. In Europe, continental Europe, consumer confidence is back to pre-pandemic levels, it seems. Rising confidence, high energy prices, though, supply chains, distortions, all those kind of things that we're beginning to realise is actually going to get in the way of that. But we'll see. Consumer confidence, as it's measured by things like people mobility and whether they're going shopping and all the rest of it, rather than official data, seems to be showing that people are getting back to normal living. As far as the UK is concerned, I know we're going to talk about the energy crisis, but first of all, the wider energy crisis. It looks like plans for the new Sizewell C plant will be sold off to institutional investors, i.e. getting in the way of China and its CGN taking or continuing its minority stake in this. It's obviously China's involvement since Huawei and the rest of it coming under threat. The UK fuel prices has caused, as you'd expect, quite a fall in sterling, pound to its lowest level in 8 months. Fears of stagflation actually coming through. Rise in bond yield signals that interest rate rise will probably happen by February as well. So not looking very good for the UK as we speak. UK consumers, if they are customers of failed energy groups. In fact, all of us will face an additional, probably about another £30 per year, 820 million in total for the cost of failed energy groups. Maybe only 10 suppliers, it's felt, will survive the winter. As far as oil's concerned, on a broader level, inventories and speculators basically have sunk it. Higher speculators have gone very, very long on oil. Now they're coming back slightly, so that's caused a fall in the oil price. And gold has sunk on yields going up, government bond yields going up in the United States, and also a stronger dollar. So we're looking at $17.38 an ounce in Asia today. Where is oil going? I do not know, but people are looking at above $80 a barrel, and that will cause problems, which we will talk about when it actually gets there. That's your global view.
All right, Michael. I don't know when you're going to call it, but a lot of people are now saying, isn't it time for Boris Johnson to resign? Because he's destroyed the British economy. now, because of these supply chains, they're talking about stagflation. I mean, I can't remember the time people talked about stagflation in the UK. Even at the worst days in 92, 93, when Black Wednesday happened, nobody was muting the idea of stagflation. But these are supply chain problems caused by Boris Johnson that took England out of the EU, that didn't make adequate preparation. And there are still many problems coming home to roost. The Northern Ireland border issue is another one. He has destroyed the economy. That's one. Number two, Ofcom is saying they could have put stronger measures in place for suppliers of gas before this crisis happened. The former Ofgem chief, beg your pardon, Ofgem chief is saying this now, that they could have put stronger measures in place. So these two crises the UK has faced could have been averted, Michael. Could have been averted. When is Boris Johnson going to go?
Could have, should have is very, very good looking at everything in a rear view mirror. That's what I'd say if I were Boris Johnson. Fortunately, I don't get involved in politics, so I don't know. Could he go? Yeah, I think if the vote went to the country right now, panic buying would be very large in people's minds. When the panic buying stops, which will presumably be over the weekend or into next week, maybe people will think differently then, but they won't when interest rates start to go up in February. Shall we define what stagflation actually is? And not so much the 80s, more the 70s, which I remember very well in this country, where there was weak growth and rising interest rates. That's what stagflation is. In other words, where you have to raise interest rates because of the rise in inflation, but growth is so weak, all the problems begin to implode on one another. It didn't happen then. It may not happen. I mean, against everything that you've said, you're absolutely right about it. And certainly Ofgem, always regulators are really wise after the event, aren't they? I didn't hear anything from Ofgem before all this started to happen, even when there was talk about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline actually not being completed, possibly into Germany. I didn't hear anything from Ofgem then. They're perfectly good regulators. Maybe they'll be they have to pass on the costs of failed energy suppliers to us all. We have to cope with that. But they're the people that put the business model, which a lot of the energy suppliers have actually said is not fit for purpose, i.e. putting caps on the prices that they can actually put through to the consumer. I didn't hear anything from Ofgem before all this happened. So I'm not too worried about what Ofgem say. What I'm really worried about is the fact that we don't know where the economy is heading. Nobody knows even where the global economy is heading, and nobody knows where Evergrande and how big are those roots of disaster which are ripped through big banks throughout the world. We just simply do not know. All we can do is look to what's happened in the past, and we keep our fingers crossed. That's basically what's happening at the moment. And this is what the markets are telling us. The markets are telling us that in the United States, the US government may be shut down. I know it goes through this pantomime every year, but there are all sorts of these headwinds hitting us, which are all down to this. Not so much Brexit, they're down to COVID, and they're down to the slowdown in the world economies. Not saying a lot of it is not down to Brexit, certainly a lot is, but we have to find our own way. We've got to be brave and face up to the facts. It's as simple as that.
Boris Johnson is saying that he will be able to save Christmas, but will he be able to do so? Will there be guarantees that he will be able to do so? And I was particularly struck by, the spectacles of punch-offs at the forecourts. That looks really familiar. Coming from a country like Nigeria, where panic buying of petrol is something that is part of our recent experience. Well, maybe before the Buhari administration. But I wanted you to talk about Janet Yellen. Janet Yellen is saying that the U.S. will run out of money by October 18, except, Congress is able to act in a bipartisan manner to extend the borrowing limit and ensure that, there is shared responsibility in terms of how to address the liquidity crisis in the United States. How bad, really, is the situation? Because she has put a deadline on it, and are we likely to have that bipartisan outcome before 00.01 EST Eastern Time on October 18th? Second issue, Evergrande. Evergrande is now selling off parts of its assets, particularly its 20% stake in a bank. And the Chinese authorities are also encouraging, stakeholders to buy up those assets so that Evergrande will be able to solve its problem. Is this now a clear path out of the crisis that property development company faces. He defaulted on $83.5 million, payback debt interest repayment last week. This week also, I think, as of today, he's also not been able to pay an additional 40-something million that he's supposed to pay to bondholders. What's your take?
Right. When I was in church 2 weeks ago, I played the organ, and I played a hymn, Dear Lord and Father of Mankind. You probably know it quite well. It's a very famous hymn.
Ways. Yes.
Correct. But the line I was going to get to was, "Oh, still small voice of calm." That's how the hymn actually ends. Now, that's not very popular these days, is it? Noise coming from everywhere. Noise in fuel queues, noise in the Senate, noise from Janet Yellen, noise from Evergrande, whichever way that's going to go. Let's do Janet Yellen first of all. If I were her, I'd be making similar kind of noises as well, because it's the only way to knock heads together to get these US politicians to agree on something they always agree year after year, but it's got more noise attached to it. Oh, still small voice of calm. As far as Evergrande's concerned, got no idea which way that's going to go. It might be a systemic failure to the strange Chinese system that depends on consumers, but also on huge state spending. Will it contain that problem to itself? Oh, still small voice of calm. It might do, it might not. I don't know. What it shows the failure of that kind of system, and it shows the stupidity of ever increasing debt and nobody actually supporting that debt. If the state companies have to buy it, then China will make sure that they absolutely do. But less noise, more action. Oh, still small voice of calm. That's how that hymn ends. I would recommend it to you.
Okay. Well, but will Boris Johnson save Christmas? I know those punch-ups at the forecourts.
The hymn.
Does the hymn apply?
Does the hymn apply?
He's a politician, as I keep saying. Politicians are noisy by nature. Oh, still small voice of calm. What we have to do is pick our way to the news from the noise. That's the task.
Right. You know, there's an American group called Naughty by Nature. We got the OPP, and you know. We'll go to COVID-19 pandemic, and we'll talk some more. Thank you so much, Michael, by the way. We'll talk some more about COVID-19 pandemic. He was at Adesuwa's birthday yesterday. Adesuwa, don't say because you're in Abuja there are no implications. The implications apply, and you need to do the needful. And so we're waiting for your package in Lagos for us to celebrate. Dr. Bati, all clear?
Yes, certainly. Good. Well, Adesuwa understands the implications. She knows that she can't just celebrate her birthday and it will all go quiet that way.
And these are the implications and forces, Adesuwa.
Don't worry, I will ask Rufai to send you the details.
Yes.
And for you to do the needful. The boys are waiting.
Yes.
The girls are waiting too. The bullet gang is ready for you.
Good morning, guys. Let me just say, in Abuja, we reflect on our birthdays. We just reflect and stay back. There are no implications here in Abuja.
Okay, that's for Abuja.
Good morning, guys.
No
Great to
fun
see you,
in Abuja.
Well, unfortunately, the COVID-19 has killed more than 4.7 million people. And, every morning I reel out this statistics, these figures, because the pandemic is all about data and numbers, whether it's about the virus itself or, the number of people it has infected and affected, or the vaccines we're rolling out. It's all about the numbers. And we need to sometimes, remember, or all the time actually remember that it's beyond the numbers. These are people's loved ones, their lives, their community, their businesses that have been affected. And so we keep reading out these numbers because they're very important. Over 233 million people have now been infected. As I said, 4.7 million of these have died from the virus. And of course, over 6.1 billion doses of the vaccines have been administered. China, where the virus was first reported from, has administered over 2.2 billion doses of the 6.1 billion doses administered already globally. Despite the global vaccine inequality, more countries are administering the third dose to shore up protection in their most vulnerable population. Well, here in Nigeria, 295 new infections and 6 deaths were reported in the last 24-hour period. Again, the NCDC is reporting a backlog of 2 COVID-19 deaths from South Delta State. From the 23rd and 26th of this month, the NCDC says 2 deaths were unreported and they have now been reported from Delta State. We now know also that 4.7 million Nigerians are targeted for vaccination have taken a shot of vaccine, while over 1.9 million others have been fully vaccinated with the AstraZeneca and Moderna vaccines, meaning that they have taken 2 jabs of the vaccines. Still in Nigeria, away from the vaccination numbers, the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 has set up a delegation to 4 states and the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, to work with the governments there to help them basically enforce the COVID-19 restriction. The National Coordinator of the PSC, Dr. Mukhtar Mohammed, disclosed the affected states as Lagos, Kano, Oyo, and Akwa Ibom. He says the teams will work with the government of those states and the FCC administration for 2 weeks to develop the framework for implementation. The worry really is that protocols put in place to curb the spread of the virus are largely ignored in those states. Protocols such as the curfew. A lot of people don't know the curfew is still in place nationwide. The use of face masks. Venues that should ordinarily remain closed have been reopened. So those are the things that they're going to be doing in those states. We keep an eye on that. But it also comes on a day the Nigerian Senate announced it will be investigating alleged fake test results. Listen to this, that Ghanaian authorities use in defrauding Nigerian travelers. The Nigerian Senate says that this has become necessary following numerous allegations and complaints by Nigerian travelers isolated at Ghanaian isolation facilities. Bottom line, the allegation is that Nigerians are testing positive in Ghana, even though they test negative before departure, which is a requirement to enter Ghana. You have to have a negative PCR test you've taken at least 72 hours before. And they are now also told to pay up to 70,000 naira in isolation. Some travelers say by the time they are done with isolation, they end up paying about 1 million naira in Ghana. So the Nigerian Senate says they need to look at this. Well, away from Nigeria, barring any last-minute changes, Algeria is to start production of the Sinovac vaccine today in partnership with China. And the aim is to meet domestic demand and, of course, export the surplus. That's according to the Prime Minister in the country. The North African country has been importing this particular vaccine, Sinovac, so it's not new to it. And the government there has also been doing the maths. It says that producing this vaccine locally will save Algeria $5 per dose. And by the time they produce 50 million doses, it would have saved Algeria $250 million. That is a whopping sum. Finally, Japan's COVID emergency, one of the longest in the world, is to be lifted for the first time in 6 months as the COVID cases there continue to drop. The government, however, is preparing to set in place new measures, including vaccine passport and virus tests to contain the spread of the virus.
Okay, where do we start from? Yes, let's start with Algeria, collaborating with China to produce the Sinovac vaccine. I mean, Algeria has a contract with China to receive from China up to about 20 million vaccines. But out of the 45 million population of Algeria, Algeria has only been able to just immunize just about 2 million persons. But this plan, which was announced by the Minister of the Pharmaceutical Industry, they have a minister that is strictly in charge of the pharmaceutical industry, had announced as far back as July the plan to collaborate with China and also produce vaccines locally, which I think is a major development for Africa, where 3% of the 1.2 billion population in Africa has only been, has received at least one vaccine. And now you have Algeria now, collaborating not just with China to produce the Sinovac vaccine, also Algeria is looking at collaborating with Russia to produce Sputnik 5. Yeah. And with regard to the Sinovac vaccine, here is a plan to produce in October, 1 million. In November, 2 million vaccines. In December, 3 million vaccines. And by January, they will have ramped it up to about 5 million vaccine doses on a monthly basis. And according to the Minister of Pharmaceutical Industry, this will reduce the cost of the vaccine by at least $5. And then, of course, Algeria will also be able to export the vaccines. Now, so why do I say this is important? Because one of the major concerns has been how Africa can get involved in production of the vaccine and exchange of technology to be able to put Africa in a better place. So we have Algeria now. Before Algeria, Egypt is also working on collaborating with the Chinese to provide the Sinovac vaccine in Africa. And the good news about Algeria is that for the Sputnik 5, the raw materials will be sourced locally. But for the Sinovac, they will get the raw materials from Beijing until they are in a good place. You also have Senegal also producing vaccines, or working in that direction. The Fondation Institut de Pasteur in Dakar, so you also have that. In South Africa, Aspen Pharmacare, has been involved with the United States in what they call fill and finish of the Johnson & Johnson and also of the Pfizer vaccine. So this is the direction I think in which Africa can go to solve the problem of inadequacy of vaccines in Africa and also to acquire skills in this particular direction. I know that the logical question that anybody will ask is, where is Nigeria in all of this? With all the talents that we have, with all the resources that we have, with the fact that in this country at the time, we used to produce vaccines in Ushudi. So, but what has happened many years after? As for Japan, yes, the Japanese, they've chosen, the ruling party has chosen a new leader. Yoshihide Suga is stepping down, and it's instructive to know that Yoshihide Suga, had to step down from the leadership of the ruling party, particularly because of COVID and how he managed it. Remember all that objection to the hosting of the Tokyo Olympics and how the Suga administration stood his ground. But it has claimed him as a casualty. But about the same time, by the end of this month, effectively, Japan, although Japan never imposed very strict restrictions, is going to relax some of those restrictions in 17 prefectures. Japan has recorded about 1.79 million cases and about 175,000 deaths. And on a daily basis, the infection rate is about 2,000. But whatever progress may have been made so far is attributed to vaccination. But they will still need to continue to take precautions and continue to ramp up the vaccination so that there is no reversal. Okay?
Well, you've pretty much said it all, but I just want to highlight certain facts. Algeria has a ministry for pharmaceutical industry.
Yes.
I'm all for the Orosai report and the lean, mean government machine, but it goes to show the importance that they place on that industry, and this is why they get the results that they do. Also with Kishida, with that election, who was narrowly beaten, the one, my favorite actually, Mr. Kano, who is the vaccinations minister. Japan actually has a vaccinations minister. So you see nations taking this crisis a lot more seriously than we do. So you don't need to wonder why we are where we are and why we sort of fell off the map, like you said, from our halcyon days when we were producing vaccinations here in Nigeria. It's really sad that it's come to this.
And you see, in all of this,
You cannot be more correct.
we need to go back to the conversation about R&D. What are our universities doing?
Yeah.
By now, if we were ready, I thought that we will have make money available to the likes of Professor Happy and the likes, that they have genome sequencing, to put those sequences out and start making research on locally made vaccines, if we were ready. By now, all the vaccine candidates we talked about, by now I thought we should have put effective measures in place to ensure that they are already passing maybe the first or the second test trials now. Thirdly, by now, I thought we'll have been building hubs for production. Nigeria will have been thinking of how they can improve on the mRNA technology or probably even bring it into the country, make massive investment, knowing the fact that it will yield results in like 4 or 5 years from now, or 6, 7 years, because we'll still have disease. It might not be COVID, it might be another disease, there's still Ebola,
Yeah.
And this mRNA technology can work for diseases across board. So I thought by now, if we're ready, even if we don't have the capacity to start it, Nigeria will have called in companies like Sanofi and the likes to say, okay, come and establish an mRNA hub out of Nigeria and give a moratorium for technology transfer 5-10 years and start to replicate companies. By now, I thought to a large extent, we'll have started improving on capacities, for things like fillets, for fill and finish, and start to have those factories at least that we can start to do that and do packaging. If we were ready, by now, 2 years on from the pandemic, we should have made some investments. But Adesua, if I ask you genuinely, have we done all of that? I'm sure your answer to me will be no. So we can come here and talk about how Nigeria used to produce vaccines in the 70s and 80s in Yaba. But it is obvious from the body language, we're not ready. The problem with us in this country is we are too concerned about quick, easy money. Crude oil, we lift crude oil. We don't even process it, we send it abroad. We get 1 trillion naira. That's the money we are concerned about. We collect taxes in industries we have not provided value for. But when you tell Nigeria that if we invest in mRNA technology, in 10 years' time, that money can bring XYZ million to the government account, they say, 10 years is too long. We don't have foresight. And they forget that 10 years is just around the corner. The benchmark, I keep saying is, I remember when we used to talk about Vision 2010, 96, 97, 98, 99. Yeah. That was the buzzword. Early 2000, Vision 2010. Like it was far off. 2010 came, we didn't achieve Vision 2010. And that's the way it is. So we need to make those investments now. But currently, maybe it might change tomorrow, but as of today, we're not ready.
Well, there was also Vision 2020. We also missed the targets in that regard. Yeah. But there was this story you brought up about the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 sending enforcement teams to 4 states of the Federation. Okay, why 4 states? And why are we just now talking about enforcement teams? And in a federal system, with the Presidential Steering Committee saying that the state governments have the original mandate for ensuring COVID-19 guidelines are respected, why should it be the Presidential Steering Committee sending enforcement teams across the country? The bigger challenge that we face is that nobody has been respecting those guidelines. We're told about, restriction of access to public gatherings. We're told that there is a curfew in place 12 midnight to 5 a.m. Do you see anybody anywhere, observing all of that? But I thought the more important point made by Boss Mustafa is the fact that Nigeria is going to get a lot more in terms of vaccines. 3.5 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine from the United States, 1.1 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson on a monthly basis, and another 2.5 million doses of the AstraZeneca. When you add all of that together, that's almost close to 9 million doses. But we expect that this will be properly kept and that government or the Presidential Steering Committee and the other relevant agencies, including the MPACDA, will not drop the ball in terms of ensuring the effective administration of these vaccine doses. While we hope that someday somebody will wake up and realize that if Algeria can do it, if Egypt can do it, if South Africa can make an effort to produce vaccines, even with collaboration with other agencies, that Nigeria also can probably do it.
Thank you so much, Adesua.
Very well said, Dr. Bassey. And just to say that for those 4 states, they're regarded as some of the high-burden states. As you know, Lagos is the epicenter with the most cases. And we've also seen the Delta variant in some of those states that have been mentioned. So perhaps that's why they singled out those 4 states, as well as the Federal Capital Territory. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much, Adesua.